Hey there, welcome to the Reinsurance Podcast, the place where we dive into all things reinsurance, the coolest part of insurance. We're your hosts, Jared and Ben, a couple of ex-practitioners who loved the industry so much we founded Supercede to tackle some of its biggest headaches. And we're here to share our insights and stories with expert guests as we uncover what's really going on in the industry.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Reinsurance Podcast, where today, in a matter of minutes, 21 minutes to be precise, because that's all the time we've got for today's episode, we will be covering, Jared and myself, what to do about your reinsurance if you are in the category of massive global insurance company looking to buy reinsurance, or at least quite big, sizable companies. This one is for you.
Well, we're sort of running through the gambit of how do these different sort of classes of insurance companies think about reinsurance?
Upper class of companies.
Yeah. So we're with you, top deck of the boat. So put down your tails and put down caviar, and off we go. So where do we start?
I think maybe let's just try and get inside the mind of these companies. So you're a blue chip, is that the term? Mm-hmm. Blue chip insurer, a very, very large established player in the industry. You're probably already on the menu for most reinsurers as a go-to partner.
Yeah.
You've got 100 or more contracts that you buy organized across a very large number of treaties. And with that comes a great deal of coordination across regions, entities, etc. You might be growing, you might be shrinking, you might be trying to push in some areas, trying to retain more in others. Mm-hmm. You might have a very particular attitude towards the fungibility of capital and so on, and how much you want to lean into the elasticity of pricing at that point in time. Yeah. So how on earth do you make sense of the noise? That is the question.
It is the question, and it's the thing that when you think about the strategic questions the largest insurance companies have, as you sort of alluded to, there's such an array of things they can be doing. Should you be rolling these things together into group, like worldwide programs, or should you be segmenting them out into different groups? There's a huge reliance of the brokers to help them navigate what that buying strategy should be. But at the center of all these things, as we've always sort of hit the drum on, is how do you leverage the data that you have to help guide that? Like, which parts of your book are more effective or profitable than others? How should you evaluate whether you increase retention somewhere, and what might that look like compared to other sectors of what you're trying to buy? The only way you get any sense of decision-making around that is by having the data that allows you to sort of apply various lenses to that. If you have the data in one place, you can say, well, what if we carve it up this way? What does that look like? And what if we carve it up this other way or combine it this other way? What might that look like? If you spend so much time organizing data that you're unable to do that work, that's the thing that becomes crippling in your ability to make strategic decisions. But the really big companies, like, this is incredibly hard. Right? Because most big companies didn't start as a good insurance company and then expand their own little office there and then go, ooh, bit by bit added their products. They went and said, ooh, we see value in that region, we'll buy someone, or they expand into another region and they buy a team, or they expand products, or they merge companies together. But the result of those various forms of inorganic growth, if you will, mean that they are oftentimes running dozen different back office systems. Like the big insurance companies are sort of that very comical but common example of, well, how many clients do you have? There's not really a correct answer because we don't really know. Are we counting this company or client several times for a lot of different accounts? Do we call it once? But you have it where they have core systems that don't capture currency. Why would they? They've always been in Spain and it's always been euros. Right? Or why would they? It's always been in America and it's always been in dollars. But when you merge those data sets together for worldwide programs, all of a sudden you need to have indicated which parts of the data are in which core currencies and build on layers of conversion rates and things into the data set. Those problems that didn't exist when the data was being sort of moved in its silo and you could just infer it was all dollars. But But those problems now exist because you're trying to think about the portfolio that you have in different ways. So they're in many ways the victims of that growth in trying to sort of deconstruct it and make it all sort of sing from the same hymn sheet. Is that an analogy that I can? Does that work?
Yeah. No, I genuinely believe there is no greater opportunity for the so-called art of the deal in reinsurance than amongst the reinsurance buyers for the largest insurance companies in the world, because nowhere else is there the potential for such a large amount of horse trading or leverage between, so many different portfolios and entities. Nowhere else are there so many exposures basically being created for the reinsurers to get access to, right? And effectively, the reinsurers want the business of these insurers because they are pooling it for them. They are creating opportunities for the reinsurance industry to exist.
Yeah.
But at the moment, instead of the art of the deal with genius, reinsurance buying teams being able to hedge all these different portfolios against each other and choose what to keep and what to share and what to blend with possibly their own inwards, we're instead on this very strange, chasing of the tail, sweeping of the streets, aligning of the fiefdoms. I'll stop there with non-existent expressions, but weird efforts to try and clean up the mess from what's created when you have, to what you described, so many organizations being built by merger and acquisition, being built by growth without alignment. And so the actual role of reinsurance buying teams too often in these very large global insurance companies is cleanup. Try and track down some information that we need. Try and clean it up so that it makes vague sense and aligns to what we've done last year. And then spend weeks and months trying to align it into some comprehensible fashion so that you can abashedly share it to your reinsurers and be like, we tried really hard to make this understandable to you. Please don't penalize us too much when it comes to pricing, which is just the completely wrong way around the conversation. It should be like, you want our business, here you go, here's how we're doing it this year. You can have this much if you're nice to us. The power balance should be with those massive players, but so often it's not, because they can't actually evidence the value that they're going to bring to those reinsurance partners.
Yeah. I mean, quick pause. I think we can make aligning of the fiefdoms a saying. I believe in this one. But you're right. So oftentimes these huge insurance companies around the world will buy the same structures and programs that they've always bought. They might maybe blend two perils at the top of a program or something, but they always buy motor separately, and they always buy Europe separately, and they always do marine and, grouped this way. But they buy so similarly to how really small insurance companies buy. And we talked about in the podcast about how small companies think about it. The role of reinsurance, if you're a really small insurer, is fundamentally different than the role it should play at a worldwide conglomerate insurer. And it's the most interesting problem set for the insurance company. But because you're right, you painted a beautiful picture of why that complexity is actually incredibly exciting. You're looking at worldwide portfolios of risk that should be diced and blended and merged and thought of in these really interesting ways to maximize the protection of it. But because the data is so hard to wrestle to the ground, you're sort of left going, well, what does the data for this book look like and this book look like? And in addition to that, because there's the reliance not only on those internal teams that are also sort of segmented by those various classes or geographies, but the reliance on the brokers means that the broker who's tasked with doing the motor data prep and the broker who's tasked with doing the marine data prep or the property data prep or the casualty data prep generates an output that is incompatible with all the others. So even if you went, well, what if we combined property cat and the whole business in Europe? Impossible. Like those data sets are not aligned in any way, shape, or form. You're not able to sort of take the consistent structure behind those and blend them together and say, well, it could look like this. And that's not to say that is a good or a bad idea, but it's to say that we're unable to assess whether it's a good or bad idea because we don't have a way to make the data aligned in such a way that allows us to evaluate it. Right? We're just sort of going, well, let's just assume it's not a good idea and move on. Perhaps.
And when I put my underwriter hat on and I think about this from a reinsurer's perspective, there are certain clients that you look for to be a material part of your portfolio, right? You're like, I'm willing to put, I don't know, let's deliberately pick on a really big insurer, Allianz or AXA or AIG, lots of names beginning with A.
Front of the phone book, really heavy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm willing to have, their business as like 5 to 10% of my overall reinsurance portfolio, because they represent such a large amount of global premium that actually that's okay and I can live with that. With pricing being a factor of supply and demand, however, like how many people want my business makes a difference as to how good a price I can get. If it's 5% versus 10%, that's actually massive across several reinsurers. If all of the reinsurers, and there's more than 10 of them, want 10%, they're going to fight, to the end to get it. If all of those same reinsurers want 5%, then maybe you're fighting to try and get them on your business, and that's a complete shift of balance. But because we're talking about such large allocations, they have to have such certainty as reinsurers, as underwriters, as to what they're getting themselves into to be able to want more, right? It's all very well dabbling in a client, but if you're a big client and you're going to become a material part of a reinsurer's portfolio, the onus on the reinsurer to really be confident and understand what they're getting themselves into only increases. You can't say, sure, let's do this massive quota share, on this business, that then means that I'm massively exposed to your business, unless they really understand it. And I think likewise that translates to the cedents, the reinsurance buying team's ability to say, oh, you want us to be a big part of your portfolio. These are the ceding commissions we'd like. You're not going to be able to charge those ceding commissions unless they are so confident that your portfolio is the right ingredient for the portfolio that they're trying to build in turn at the reinsurance level.
One of the other points you mentioned or phrases that you used is horse trading. And it's this concept in reinsurance, for those who might be younger and less familiar, but this concept that a big a worldwide insurer might have some parts of their portfolio which are incredibly appealing and others that are less so. And they tend to leverage their relationships and their size to say, well, give us a bit of a better price on the casualty and we'll give you all the property cat or something of this nature. But what it implies in the current way that we work on this in this industry is that those are two deals that run independently of each other. And as we're sort of exploring, what if there's a better way to evaluate the deployment of capital across all of those various risks in their portfolio in a much more thoughtful way, right? If you think about how we purchase assets in the financial markets, you think about like a tech portfolio, it might be weighted very heavily on big company stocks, your Apples and your Nvidias and others, or it might be weighted into sort of smaller ones below different caps based on your appetite. Everyone sort of looks at those portfolios like intentionally and strategically of what amount of weight do they want to give there. The reinsurance market should start to move more towards thinking about those massive companies in a similar way of being able to better understand the weights that they want to have across that portfolio and what kind of sort of sub-assortments that can be built there, right? Better awareness of this much across these various subsections or geographies alongside bigger parts, but they're sort of treated all fundamentally independently. So the reinsurer's ability to think about that client as a truly strategic partner isn't really there as much as they're saying, okay, I'll give you a few more points of protection on that class only if you give me a bit more back on this one. That's kind of a rudimentary way of doing it from what we could be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if you look at what the barriers have been there, typically it's because, well, the data is not formatted in the same way for that other line of business, or, we don't have a way of joining up the conversation there because we can't see everything in one place. Yeah. To be honest, nobody really knows what the guy in Italy does when they buy their reinsurance portfolio. We don't know, how the US specialty portfolio buys its reinsurance because there's no visibility for us as a group. So how could we even think about horse trading? Yep. And I think that's where now software solutions are getting ever more appealing, right? Because you're beginning to realize that nirvana of one day we as the global group will stop acquiring companies and we'll stop introducing new formats of data, and we'll iron out every mistake ever, and the brokers and original insureds that bring us business at the front end, surely one day will bring us everything pre-formatted in the right format.
Yeah.
People realize that's not ever going to happen.
Yeah.
There's always going to be very complicated, not uniform data on the way into those big global groups.
Yeah.
But it is possible now with software to convert it into uniform data out the other side, to bring structure to the unstructured stuff they inherit from all of those different tentacles around the world in different portfolios. So given that, how does this start to change when you add a layer of software towards the reinsurance portfolio management of a Ceded Re team? Like how would you bring together, if you were the buyer of a large insurance group around the world, how would you bring together all that information and use it to your advantage?
So this is exactly how we think about it at Supercede, but you have two major things that happen straight away. One is by putting everyone into the same place to prep the data, the structure of it is universally consistent. No matter how their core data system is organized, the software then builds that structure in as they sort of centralize it. So that's immediately valuable. The other thing that happens is it's far faster to do that. And to your earlier points, if that work is done more quickly and it's then centralized and structured in a certain way, you have incredibly smart people who you've freed up a huge amount of time for. You can throw them at questions, even if the answer is no. You don't feel the objective isn't to get the data organized because it's due to the broker by Friday and you just got to get it in a good enough place, or due to the reinsurer by Friday. It's one going, well, the data's in place, even if it's a summer project, as we talked about in previous podcasts, where you're saying, what if we did something weird? Like, is there anything creative we could do? Is there a better way to think about this? The data's all structured in a consistent way. So you could just have a handful of people who are really, really smart, spending their summer project between renewal seasons, throwing all manner of ideas at it. What if we did something like this? What if we split it out that way? Run some analysis on it, on the clean data set, and go, that probably wouldn't really have an impact. But sweet. There's huge value in having time afforded to smart people to just ask questions and to be curious. But if that idea now is like, well, what if we did this? And it's going to include 3 months of manipulating all the different data sets, they're not even going to get to the end of the project window by the time they got the data organized. So the ability to explore the art of the possible evaporates, because it's not possible until you get a better way to quickly access data that's aligned with itself. And
looking at just the comment we opened this episode with, I guess, which was, I can't remember what I called it, aligning the fiefdoms and all that sort of thing. How does that change as well to be a bit more coordinated? Because I can imagine that if you were being rotated around an organization historically and somebody said to you, congratulations, you're going to be the new head of Ceded Re for a bit. People's historical reaction would be like, no, because they know what that involves, right? They're like, you mean basically running around after every fiefdom in this organization and trying to figure out what reinsurance they should buy and how they should manage the process towards buying it? How's that changing? And in particular with Supercede, because we don't really talk about it enough. How is that role becoming actually one of the most exciting roles you can have?
I wonder if I'd like to have a conversation with someone who's made that leap, to see how much of it was a surprise. Them going, well, I've been leading the reinsurance buying out of the UK, so I'm super excited to take on the global spot, only to then realize, wait, why does it come from these other 5 geographies in this way? And why does this look like that? And hang on, is this a poison chalice?
Yeah.
But you're right. When you think about it in the role of a client that has Supercede embedded, it's an awareness of going, great, I know all the data is going to look like this. I know the teams around the world, when they put the data through, we apply these different approaches to it, and it gets organized and cleansed in this way. And now I'm looking at this as a purely strategic role. What are the objectives that I have now as the head of Ceded Re, with all the data at my fingertips that aligns the fiefdoms, that says, great, it's all organized in these various buckets. Here's how we're currently buying to protect all of it. and let's be strategic. Is that the most effective way to buy? Let's bring our broker partners in and say, we're thinking about just gutting the entire framework and reevaluating this from the ground up. What is the art of the possible? And seeing this as an almost incredibly exciting way to look at the biggest spend the insurance company has on the balance sheet every single year. Like, that's a super exciting job if you free it from the tedium that's related to the data cleansing and chasing all the departments and that. If you move it into here's all the data and it's cleansed and organized and put in the same way, your job is to optimize the way we buy reinsurance. Those are two different roles. I think the status quo is much more of this, it's the most burdensome chore of a role. Yeah, and the opportunity is for it to become profoundly valuable.
Yeah, if I were to try and encapsulate the mission of Supercede for large or very large cedents, it's really to help them go from being, headless chickens, effectively trying to get the job done in time so that the organization has reinsurance in place, like grade C, to the other end of the spectrum. How do you make them true custodians of the enormous brand value that those organizations have in the global reinsurance market, and become and enable on the side of their brokers expert negotiations, leveraging all of that organization has to offer.
Yeah. So Ben, we talk a lot about the data piece, but we also have a deals platform that allows the cedents to sort of track all their deals. For the really large cedents specifically, how do you think about the role that the kind of combination of those two things helps the big clients, having both the data organized but also their deals centralized in one spot?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm taking back to a comment that Tom Wakefield made in the recent 1/1 renewals lecture that we hosted here. He talked about people getting a lot smarter with retentions, particularly now in a hard market where reinsurance costs a lot of money. And so you might want to buy lots of reinsurance, but you might have to choose quite carefully where you're going to buy reinsurance and where actually you're going to keep a bit more. So at what point do you want to put in place those deductibles in the new market that we're going into? And at the moment, if I ask that question to a company without Supercede deals, it's going to take them weeks to just figure out where the deductibles are now, right? Where currently they are buying coverage above. Versus actually in Supercede, you'd be able to see very quickly not only, what are the deals that we're buying, what are the terms and the layers of all those different deals. I want to see them all side by side in the same way, but also to see the underlying data to work out whether or not that makes sense. I think it's the combination of the two that's really important here. Yeah. Like, how can you see simultaneously how a book of business is performing with a reinsurer hat on versus all of your other books of business, and then also see what deals you've got in place to cover those portfolios, and to really challenge, is that the optimal way of doing things, or could we be doing this smarter?
Yep. Yeah, and again, that goes into how this becomes an incredibly exciting part of the business. It's super strategic and unlocking a massive amount of value to an insurance company, however large. Awesome. This has been a super interesting one.
Yeah, 22 minutes maybe by the end. But we tried. We tried to keep it within the time.
We did our best. We spent too much time on aligning fiefdoms, that's why.
Yeah, well, it's important stuff.
Important business. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Reinsurance Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review to let us know how we're doing, preferably 5 stars. For more insights and updates, follow us on LinkedIn and visit our website at supercede.com/podcasts. You'll find the links in the show notes.